I was standing at the water fountain after practice when Coach Martinez's wife walked up to me and said the words that would change everything. "Girls shouldn't play sports," she said, loud enough for half the team to hear. "Especially not girls like you." The way she looked me up and down when she said it made my stomach twist into knots. I knew exactly what she meant by girls like you. My name is Sarah Chen, and up until that moment I thought I had found my place in the world. I was 17, a junior at Roosevelt High School in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and I had just made varsity basketball as the only sophomore the previous year. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Basketball wasn't just something I did, it was who I was. When other girls my age were figuring out makeup tutorials, or which boy to ask to homecoming, I was in the gym at 6 in the morning, working on my crossover dribble until the sound of the ball hitting the hardwood became as familiar as my own heartbeat. My parents immigrated from Taiwan when I was 3 years old. My father worked at the local manufacturing plant, pulling double shifts most weeks, while my mother cleaned houses during the day and took English classes at night. They didn't understand basketball at first. In Taiwan, my mother had told me once, girls focused on academics, piano, maybe ballet if the family could afford it. Sports were for boys, and even then, only if they weren't smart enough for university. But they saw how happy basketball made me, how I lit up when I talked about practice, about games, about the feeling of sinking a three-pointer from the corner, while the crowd held its breath. My father started coming to games during my freshman year. He would sit in the same spot, third row up behind our bench, wearing his work jacket because it was the warmest coat he owned. He didn't understand all the rules, but he clapped when everyone else clapped and cheered when I scored. My mother came when she could, usually looking exhausted from her day jobs, but she would smile when she saw me play. They were proud, even if they didn't fully get it. That pride meant everything to me. Coach Martinez had recruited me personally after watching me play in a summer league tournament. I was small for basketball, only 5'4", but I was fast and I could shoot. More importantly, I understood the game in a way that couldn't be taught. I could read defenses, anticipate passes, see plays developing before they happened. Coach Martinez called it basketball IQ, and he said I had more of it than players twice my size. The team welcomed me that first year, mostly. There were a few girls who thought a sophomore didn't deserve a varsity spot, but I proved myself quickly. Jessica Williams, our team captain, became like an older sister to me. She was 6 feet tall, played center and had already committed to play Division I at Iowa State. But despite our differences in size and background, we clicked immediately. She taught me how to handle the pressure of varsity games, how to ignore the crowd when they got loud, how to stay focused when the other team started playing dirty. By my junior year, things were different. I wasn't the nervous sophomore anymore. I had become one of our leading scorers, averaging 18 points and 7 assists per game. College scouts were starting to take notice. Coach Martinez told me I had a real shot at getting a scholarship, maybe even to a major program. For my parents, this was beyond their wildest dreams. College had always been the goal, but college paid for by basketball. That was something they never could have imagined when they left everything they knew in Taiwan to give me a better life in America. That's why what happened that day at the water fountain hit me so hard. Mrs. Martinez had never liked me, I knew that much. She was one of those people who smiled to your face, but you could feel the judgment radiating off her like heat from asphalt. She was maybe 45, always perfectly dressed, always at games sitting in the front row like she owned the place. Which in a way she did. Her husband was the coach, her opinion carried weight, and she knew it. I had heard whispers before. Comments about how I took up space that could go to other girls. How some parents thought it was unfair that a scholarship might go to someone whose family just got here. I tried to ignore it, the way my parents had taught me to ignore a lot of things. Keep your head down, work harder than everyone else, prove yourself through actions, not words. But this was different. This was direct, this was meant to hurt. After she walked away that day, I stood at that water fountain for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. The water kept running, and I kept staring at it, watching it swirl down the drain. I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out everything that made me feel strong. Basketball was supposed to be the one place where none of that other stuff mattered. On the court, I wasn't the immigrant kid, or the girl who brought weird-smelling lunch to school, or the one whose parents spoke with heavy accents. I was just Sarah, the point guard who could thread a pass through traffic and hit clutch shots when the game was on the line. Jessica found me there eventually. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. But I couldn't bring myself to repeat Mrs. Martinez's words. Instead, I just shook my head and said I needed to get home. Jessica, being Jessica, didn't push. She just walked me to my car and told me to call her if I needed anything. The drive home was a blur. Cedar Falls isn't a big city, maybe 40,000 people, and most of the drive from school to our house was through quiet residential neighborhoods where every house looked basically the same. White siding, small front yards, American flags on porches. Our house stood out a little bit because my mother had planted a small garden in the front yard with vegetables that our neighbors didn't recognize. Bok choy, Chinese broccoli, bitter melon climbing up a small trellis my father had built. It was her way of keeping a piece of home close. I sat in the driveway for a long time before going inside. My mother was in the kitchen, like she always was when I got home from practice, preparing dinner while helping my younger brother David with his homework at the kitchen table. David was a freshman, quiet and studious, everything my parents had hoped for in an American child. He got straight A's, played violin in the school orchestra, and never caused any trouble. He was going to be a doctor or an engineer, something safe and respectable, something that made sense to my parents. "How was practice?" my mother asked in her careful English, not looking up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Fine," I said, which was what I always said, but this time it came out wrong, flat and lifeless. She looked up then, her knife pausing mid-chop. My mother had a way of reading faces that I think came from years of navigating a world where she couldn't always understand the words people were using, so she had learned to understand everything else instead. The tone, the body language, the things people weren't saying. "Something wrong?" she asked, switching to Mandarin, which she always did when she was worried. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to explain what had happened, what Mrs. Martinez had said, how it made me feel like I was back in middle school when kids would pull their eyes back and make ching-chong sounds when the teacher wasn't looking. But how could I explain that to my mother? How could I tell her that in the one place where I thought I belonged, where I thought I had proven myself, someone still saw me as an outsider who didn't deserve to be there? Instead, I told her I had a lot of homework and went upstairs to my room. I sat at my desk, staring at my math textbook, but the numbers and equations might as well have been written in a foreign language. All I could think about were Mrs. Martinez's words, playing over and over in my head, like a song stuck on repeat. "Girls shouldn't play sports. Especially not girls like you." What did that mean exactly? Girls like me, Asian girls, immigrant girls, short girls, girls whose parents cleaned other people's houses and worked factory jobs. Girls who ate rice with every meal, and whose grandparents lived on the other side of the world, and who sometimes forgot to switch to English when they answered the phone. I had worked so hard to fit in, to be just another American teenager who happened to be really good at basketball. I learned to love hamburgers and pizza. I watched the same TV shows as everyone else. I dated Tommy Rodriguez for 3 months sophomore year, until we both realized we had nothing to talk about besides chemistry class. I did everything I thought I was supposed to do to belong. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe I had been kidding myself this whole time, thinking that being good at basketball would be enough to make people see past everything else. Maybe Mrs. Martinez was just saying out loud what other people had been thinking all along. That night at dinner, my family could tell something was wrong, but I deflected their questions with jokes and complaints about teachers and homework. My father talked about his day at the plant, how they were getting new equipment that would make the work more efficient. My mother mentioned that Mrs. Thompson, one of her cleaning clients, had asked if she knew anyone who might want to help with yard work on weekends. David talked about his upcoming violin recital and how nervous he was about performing solo. Normal family conversation, the kind we had most nights, but it felt different to me somehow. Like I was watching it from outside, like I wasn't quite part of it anymore. These were my people, the ones who loved me unconditionally, but they lived in a different world than I did. They understood hard work and sacrifice, and building a better life for your children. They understood the value of education, and the importance of respecting authority figures, and not making waves. They didn't understand the politics of high school sports. They didn't understand how being different could be weaponized against you, even when you were doing everything right. They had protected me from a lot growing up, but they couldn't protect me from this. After dinner, I called Jessica. I needed to talk to someone who would understand, someone who knew the team dynamics and the pressures we were all under. Jessica had been dealing with her own stuff lately. Her parents were getting divorced, her mother had been drinking too much, and there was uncertainty about whether her college scholarship would still be there if her grades slipped. But she always made time for me, and I tried to do the same for her. "Okay, Spill," she said, as soon as she answered the phone. "You looked like someone had just told you Santa Claus wasn't real when I found you at the water fountain." So I told her. Every word Mrs. Martinez had said, the way she had looked at me, how it made me feel. Jessica listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I loved about her. She never tried to fix things before she fully understood them. "That bitch," she said finally, with feeling. "I'm sorry, I know she's the coach's wife, but what she said was completely out of line." "Was it though?" I asked. "I mean, what if she's right? What if I am taking up space that should go to someone else?" "Stop," Jessica said firmly. "Just stop right there. You earned your spot on this team. You're one of our best players. Mrs. Martinez doesn't know anything about basketball. She just likes feeling important because she's married to the coach. But what if other people think the same thing? What if the college scouts think I'm just some diversity pick, or whatever? Sarah, listen to me. The scouts don't care what you look like, or where your parents are from. They care about whether you can play, and you can play. You're the best point guard this school has seen in years." I wanted to believe her, but doubt had taken root in my mind, and it was growing like a weed. Every insecurity I had ever pushed down, every moment when I had felt different or out of place, came flooding back. I remembered being the only Asian kid in my elementary school class. I remembered bringing dumplings for lunch, and having kids ask me if they were made of dog meat. I remembered my mother coming to parent-teacher conferences and struggling with the English while other parents chatted easily with the teachers. Basketball had been my escape from all of that. On the court, none of those differences mattered. I was valued for what I could do, not where I came from. But Mrs. Martinez's words had shattered that illusion. Even here, in the place where I felt most confident and capable, I was still just a girl like that to some people. The next few days were rough. I went to practice. I went through the motions, but my heart wasn't in it the way it usually was. Coach Martinez noticed, of course. During a scrimmage, he pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. I wanted to tell him what his wife had said, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What if he agreed with her? What if bringing it up just made things worse for me? Instead, I told him I was just tired, maybe coming down with something. He told me to take it easy for the rest of practice, and to make sure I was getting enough sleep. He was a good coach, patient and encouraging, and it made his wife's words sting even more. How could someone married to a person who saw the best in all of us think that girls like me didn't belong in sports? The other girls on the team started to notice that something was off with me too. During practice, I was passing when I should have been shooting, playing it safe instead of taking the risks that made me effective. In the locker room afterward, I was quiet when I was usually one of the louder voices, joking around and keeping the energy up. Maria Santos, our shooting guard, finally confronted me about it. Maria was a senior, captain along with Jessica, and she didn't beat around the bush about anything. She was direct in a way that sometimes rubbed people the wrong way, but I appreciated her honesty. "What's your deal lately?" she asked after practice one day. "You're playing like you're scared of the ball." "I'm fine," I said, not looking up from tying my shoes. "Bullshit," Maria said. "You're not fine. You're playing like someone told you don't deserve to be here." The accuracy of that observation hit me like a slap. I looked up at her, and she could see it in my eyes. "Who was it?" she asked, her voice getting dangerous. Who said something to you? I shook my head. It doesn't matter. It does matter. We're a team, Sarah.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
When someone messes with one of us, they mess with all of us. Other girls were starting to gather around now, sensing drama. Amanda Foster, our power forward, sat down on the bench next to me. Seriously, what's going on? You've been weird for like a week. I looked around at these girls, my teammates, my friends. They were looking at me with genuine concern and care. These were the people I spent more time with than my own family during basketball season. They had my back on the court, in games when things got physical or when refs made bad calls. But this felt different. This felt bigger than basketball. Mrs. Martinez said something to me. I finally admitted. Last week after practice, she said girls shouldn't play sports, especially not girls like me. The reaction was immediate and intense. Maria started swearing in Spanish and English simultaneously. Jessica looked like she wanted to hit something. Amanda just kept saying, "What the hell?" over and over again. She said what? Maria demanded. I repeated it, word for word, and the temperature in the locker room seemed to drop about 10 degrees. That racist cow, Amanda said, which surprised me because Amanda was usually the most diplomatic person on the team. We have to tell Coach, Jessica said immediately. No, I said quickly, we can't. He's married to her. What if he takes her side? He won't, Maria said with certainty. Coach Martinez cares more about this team than about anything else, including his wife. But I wasn't convinced. In my experience, when it came down to choosing sides, people usually chose family. Blood was thicker than basketball, and I couldn't risk losing the one thing that made me feel like I belonged somewhere. Promise me you won't say anything, I said. Please, I just need to figure out how to deal with this myself. The girls exchanged looks, clearly not happy with that plan, but eventually they agreed. Jessica made me promise that if Mrs. Martinez said anything else to me, I would tell them immediately. I agreed, hoping that would be the end of it, that maybe Mrs. Martinez would just leave me alone from now on. I should have known better. The next Friday was our first game of the season, against Lincoln High from the next town over. It was always a big rivalry game, packed gymnasium, lots of energy. These were the games I lived for, when all the hours of practice and conditioning paid off, when I could show everyone what I was capable of. I had been looking forward to this game for weeks, but as the day approached, my excitement was mixed with anxiety. Mrs. Martinez would be there, in her usual front row seat, watching every move I made. I couldn't stop thinking about her voice, about the way she had looked at me when she said those words. Game day started early for me. I always got to school at least an hour before anyone else on game days, just to have some quiet time in the gym before the chaos started. I would shoot around by myself, go through my pre-game routine, visualize the plays we had worked on in practice. It was meditative, almost like prayer. But that Friday morning, when I walked into the gym, I wasn't alone. Mrs. Martinez was there, sitting in the bleachers, watching me. She didn't say anything, just sat there with her arms crossed, staring. It felt predatory, like a cat watching a mouse. I tried to ignore her and go through my usual routine, but I could feel her eyes on me the whole time. Every shot I took, every dribble, every movement felt scrutinized and judged. After about 20 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I gathered up the basketballs and started to leave. That's when she spoke. "You know, Sarah," she said, her voice echoing in the empty gym. "I've been thinking about what I said to you last week." I stopped walking, but didn't turn around. "I want you to know that it wasn't personal," she continued. "I just think there are some girls on this team who have more potential, who could really benefit from the playing time and the spotlight. Girls who really understand what it means to represent this school." Now I turned around. "What does that mean?" She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "I think you know what that means, honey. Some people are just more natural fits for leadership roles. Some people connect better with the community, with the boosters, with the college scouts. I connect fine with the college scouts," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you though? I mean really, because I've heard some conversations, and there's a feeling that maybe the team is becoming a little too diverse." That maybe we're focusing too much on being politically correct instead of putting the best players on the court. The words hit me like physical blows. Each one was carefully chosen, designed to make me doubt everything I had worked for. She was telling me that my success wasn't real, that I was only playing because the school needed to check some diversity box, that the college interest I was getting wasn't legitimate. I am one of the best players, I said, but even as I said it, I could hear the uncertainty creeping into my voice. Are you, she asked, tilting her head like she was genuinely curious, or are you just the best player among a certain category of girls? I stood there, holding a basketball against my hip, feeling smaller with each word she spoke. This woman, who had never played basketball in her life, who had never coached or taught or done anything except be married to someone who mattered, was systematically dismantling my confidence with surgical precision. The thing is, she continued, college scouts talk to each other, coaches talk to each other, and if word gets around that a program is just pushing certain types of players because of pressure from administrators, well, that doesn't look good for anyone involved, including you. She stood up then, smoothing down her skirt, preparing to leave. I'm not trying to be mean, Sarah. I'm actually trying to help you. Maybe it would be better for everyone, including you, if you found something else to focus on. Academic clubs, maybe, something more suitable. And then she walked away, leaving me standing there in the middle of the gym, feeling like the floor had just collapsed beneath my feet. That's when I realized this wasn't going to stop. This wasn't a one-time comment or a moment of poor judgment. This was a campaign, a deliberate effort to push me out. And if I didn't do something about it, if I just kept my head down and tried to ignore it like my parents had taught me, she was going to win. I had to make a choice. I could let her words define me, let them convince me that I didn't belong, that I was taking up space meant for someone else. I could quit the team, focus on academics, like she suggested, be the quiet, unassuming girl that people expected me to be. Or I could fight back. The game that night was a blur of motion and sound. I played okay, not great, because my head wasn't fully in it. I kept looking up at the stands, seeing Mrs. Martinez in her usual spot, wondering if she was talking to other parents about me, planting seeds of doubt about whether I deserved to be out there. We won by 12 points, and normally that would have been cause for celebration, but in the locker room afterward, I felt empty. Winning didn't feel like winning when someone was trying to convince everyone that you didn't earn it. Jessica noticed, of course. As we were packing up our gear, she pulled me aside. She was here today, wasn't she? Jessica said, Mrs. Martinez, she said something else to you. I nodded, not trusting my voice. What did she say? I told her, word for word, the whole conversation in the gym that morning. Jessica's face got darker with each detail. That's it, she said when I finished. We're telling Coach tonight. No, I said. I can't. What if nothing? Jessica interrupted. Sarah, this isn't just about you anymore. She's questioning your right to be on this team. She's making you doubt yourself, and she's doing it deliberately. That's harassment, that's bullying, and it's racist as hell. I wanted to argue, to find some other explanation for Mrs. Martinez's behavior, but I couldn't. Deep down, I knew Jessica was right. This wasn't about basketball ability, or team chemistry, or any of the other reasons Mrs. Martinez kept giving. This was about the fact that I looked different, that my family was different, that I didn't fit whatever image she had in her head, of what a Roosevelt High School basketball player should look like. But what if telling Coach makes things worse? I asked. What if he doesn't believe me? What if he thinks I'm being dramatic? Jessica put her hands on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. Sarah, do you trust me? I nodded. Then trust me when I tell you that Coach Martinez is not going to let his wife destroy one of his players. He's not going to let anyone, including his own family, hurt this team. I wanted to believe her, but trust felt like such a fragile thing right then. Mrs. Martinez had already shaken my confidence in so many ways. How could I be sure that Coach would choose me over his wife? But looking at Jessica, seeing the determination in her eyes, I realized I wasn't facing this alone. I had teammates who cared about me, who were willing to fight for me. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was where I should place my trust. Okay, I said finally, we'll tell him, but not tonight. I need some time to figure out what I'm going to say. Jessica nodded. Okay, but soon, because this can't keep going on. You're too good a player, and too good a person to let anyone make you feel like you don't belong here. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about what Jessica had said. I was a good player. I was a good person. I did belong here. Mrs. Martinez's words had made me forget that, had made me question everything I knew about myself. But the truth was still the truth, regardless of what anyone else said. I belonged on that team, not because of diversity quotas or political correctness, but because I had earned my place through years of hard work and dedication. I belonged there because I could make plays that helped my team win games. I belonged there because my teammates respected me and trusted me with the ball in clutch situations. And I belonged there because this was America, where people like my parents could come from halfway around the world and build a life for their children, where those children could grow up to be anything they wanted to be, including basketball players who competed for college scholarships. Mrs. Martinez could question my right to be there all she wanted. She could make me doubt myself temporarily, but she couldn't change the facts. She couldn't erase the hours I had spent in gyms, the games I had won, the teammates who trusted me, the coaches who believed in me. The question now was what I was going to do about it. How was I going to fight back against someone who had more power and influence than I did? How was I going to protect, not just myself, but other girls who might face the same kind of treatment in the future? I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Mrs. Martinez run me off the team. I wasn't going to quit and let her think she had won. Whatever I decided to do, I was going to stay and fight, because girls like me do belong in sports. We belong everywhere we're willing to work hard enough to earn a place, and it was time to prove that to everyone, including myself.
The decision to tell Coach Martinez came easier than I expected after what happened at Monday's practice. Mrs. Martinez showed up again, something she had never done before this season, and positioned herself right behind the bench during our scrimmage. Every time I made a mistake, every time I missed a shot or turned the ball over, I could hear her making little comments to whoever was sitting near her. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," she would say just loud enough for me to hear. Some girls just don't have that natural basketball instinct. Coach Martinez was focused on running plays and didn't seem to notice, but my teammates did. I could see Jessica and Maria exchanging looks, and Amanda kept glancing over at the bleachers with obvious irritation. The tension was affecting everyone, not just me. After practice, I was getting ready to leave when Coach Martinez called me over. My heart started racing, wondering if his wife had said something to him, if this was the moment when he was going to tell me I wasn't working out on the team. Instead, he sat down on the bleacher next to me and said, "Sarah, I've been coaching for 15 years, and I've learned to recognize when one of my players is carrying extra weight. You want to tell me what's going on?" I looked at him, this man who had believed in me when other coaches thought I was too small, who had given me opportunities to prove myself, who had never once made me feel like I didn't belong. Mrs. Martinez's words echoed in my head about how coaches talk to each other, about how my presence might reflect poorly on him. But looking at his genuine concern, I realized I had to trust someone. "It's your wife," I said quietly. His expression didn't change, but I saw something shift in his eyes. "What about my wife?" So I told him everything. The first comment at the water fountain, the conversation in the gym before Friday's game, all the little remarks during practice. I watched his face carefully as I spoke, looking for signs of anger or disbelief or defensiveness. Instead, I saw something that looked like resignation, like he wasn't completely surprised. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Sarah, I need you to know that what my wife said doesn't reflect my views or the views of this program. You're here because you're a damn good basketball player, period." "But what if she's right?" I asked. "What if college scouts think I'm just here to fill some quota?" Coach Martinez stood up and looked at me seriously. "Sarah, I've been in contact with 7 different college programs about you. 7, they're not interested because of quotas or diversity initiatives. They're interested because you averaged 18 points and 7 assists last season as a sophomore, because you have the best court vision I've seen in a decade, and because you make everyone around you better. That's what scouts care about. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was mixed with anger. Anger that I had let Mrs. Martinez's words make me doubt what I knew to be true about myself. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now I have a conversation with my wife about appropriate boundaries," he said. "And you focus on basketball. We have a big season ahead of us, and I need my point guard at full strength." I thought that would be the end of it. I thought having her husband set boundaries would make Mrs. Martinez back off. I was wrong. The next day she was waiting for me after school by my car. She was leaning against the driver's side door like she owned it, arms crossed, wearing that same fake smile she always wore when she was about to say something cruel. "I heard you had a little chat with my husband yesterday," she said as I approached. I stopped a few feet away, not wanting to get too close. "Coach Martinez and I talk about basketball all the time." "Oh, I'm sure that's all it was," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just basketball. Not you running to him with complaints about me, trying to cause problems in my marriage." "I didn't try to cause problems, I just told him what you said to me." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "What I said to you?" "Honey, I was trying to help you. I was trying to save you from embarrassment down the road when reality catches up with all this artificial encouragement you've been getting." "There's nothing artificial about my stats," I said, finding my voice. "There's nothing artificial about the interest from college scouts, isn't there?" she asked, pushing off from my car and taking a step closer, "because I've been making some calls, doing a little research. And what I'm hearing is that a lot of these diversity recruiting initiatives are about to change. The political climate is shifting, Sarah. Programs are going to have to start focusing on real talent again instead of checking boxes." I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach, but this time I recognized it for what it was. Fear. She was trying to scare me, to make me believe that my success wasn't real, that it was all going to disappear. "Even if that were true," I said, "I'd still be here on merit." "Would you?" she asked. "Because from where I'm standing, you're a mediocre player who's been overhyped because of what you represent rather than what you can actually do on the court." The words hit me like a physical blow, but instead of crumbling this time, I felt something else rising up inside me. Anger. Pure, clean anger that burned away the fear and doubt. "You're wrong," I said, my voice steady and clear, "and deep down you know you're wrong. That's why you're so threatened by me." Her fake smile faltered for just a second, and I saw something ugly underneath it. "Threatened by you? Don't flatter yourself, honey. I'm trying to protect this program from mediocrity." "No," I said, taking a step toward her now. "You're trying to protect your idea of what this program should look like. And I don't fit that picture, so you want me gone." "Maybe I do," she said, dropping the pretense entirely. "Maybe I think this team was better before it became so concerned with diversity over excellence." There it was, the truth she had been dancing around for weeks. She didn't think I belonged not because of my basketball ability, but because of who I was, what I looked like, where my family came from. "At least now I know where we stand," I said. "Yes, you do. And where you stand is on very thin ice. Young lady, my husband might be impressed with your sob story, but I'm not, and I have more influence in this community than you think." She walked away then, leaving me standing in the parking lot shaking with adrenaline, but this time the shaking wasn't from fear, it was from anger and determination. She had just made a critical mistake. She had shown me exactly who she was, dropped all the fake concern and helpful advice. Now I knew I was dealing with someone who was actively working against me, and that clarity was powerful. That night, I called an emergency team meeting. Not with Coach Martinez, just the players. I asked everyone to meet at Jessica's house, told them it was important. When I walked into Jessica's living room, and saw 8 of my teammates sitting there, all looking concerned and ready to listen, I felt a surge of gratitude and strength. "I need to tell you all something," I said, "and I need your help." I told them about the latest conversation with Mrs. Martinez, about how she had escalated from subtle comments to outright hostility. I told them about her threats, about her admission that she wanted me off the team. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Maria started pacing around the room, cursing in both languages. Amanda looked like she wanted to break something. Even quiet Katie Morrison, our backup point guard, was visibly angry. "This is insane,"
said Lindsay Barnes, our small forward. She can't just harass you like this. Actually she can, said Maria grimly. She's not officially part of the program, she's just a coach's wife who happens to be a racist bitch. So what do we do? Asked Amanda. Because we can't just let this continue. That's when Jessica spoke up. We support Sarah, all of us, visibly, publicly. We make it clear that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. What does that look like? Asked Katie. Jessica smiled, and it was the kind of smile that meant she had an idea. It looks like solidarity. It looks like making sure everyone knows exactly where we stand. Over the next hour, we planned what we started calling Operation Teamwork. It wasn't anything dramatic or confrontational, but it was coordinated and intentional. Every time Mrs. Martinez made one of her comments during games or practices, the entire team would respond as one. If she questioned my abilities, they would loudly celebrate my successes. If she tried to isolate me, they would make sure I was never alone. More importantly, we decided to document everything. Every comment, every interaction, every attempt to undermine me would be recorded. Not secretly, but openly, we would take notes, corroborate each other's observations, and build a clear record of what was happening. The thing is, Jessica explained, people like Mrs. Martinez count on their victims staying quiet. They count on people being too intimidated, or too polite to fight back. But we're not going to be quiet. The first test of our strategy came 3 days later during practice. Mrs. Martinez showed up again, taking her usual spot in the bleachers. About halfway through practice, I made a particularly good play, stealing the ball from Maria and scoring on a fast break. Instead of celebrating normally, all 8 of my teammates stopped what they were doing and applauded loudly. That's our point guard, Jessica shouted. Best steal of the season, added Amanda. Mrs. Martinez's face went red, but she couldn't say anything without looking ridiculous. After all, they were just celebrating good basketball. When practice ended and we were in the locker room, Maria pulled out a small notebook and wrote down the date, time, and Mrs. Martinez's presence at practice. Day 1 of documentation, she announced. This feels good, said Lindsay. Like we're actually doing something, instead of just watching her mess with Sarah. But I knew Mrs. Martinez wouldn't give up that easily. If anything, having the whole team visibly supporting me would probably make her more determined to prove her point about my supposed lack of merit. I was right. The next week, she took her campaign beyond basketball. She started showing up at other school events where I was present, always making sure to position herself where I could see her, always with that same disapproving expression. She came to the homecoming assembly, to the academic awards ceremony, where I received recognition for making honor roll, even to the fall drama production that David was performing in. It was psychological warfare, designed to make me feel like I was being watched and judged constantly. The message was clear, there was nowhere I could go, nothing I could do, where she wouldn't be there to remind me that I didn't belong. But the team's strategy was working. My teammates started showing up at these events too, not coincidentally. If Mrs. Martinez was at the homecoming assembly, Jessica and Maria were there cheering loudly when my name was announced as part of the basketball team introduction. If she was at the academic ceremony, Amanda and Lindsay were there applauding when I received my certificate. The visual was powerful. Here was one bitter woman trying to tear down a teenage girl, and here was an entire team of young women standing up to support their teammate. Other students started noticing. Parents started talking. The narrative was shifting. Mrs. Martinez noticed too, and she didn't like it. About 2 weeks into our solidarity campaign, she cornered Jessica after a game. I know what you girls think you're doing, she said, but you're supporting the wrong person. Sarah is going to drag this whole team down with her attitude and her victim mentality. Jessica, who had been waiting for this moment, smiled sweetly and said, Mrs. Martinez, Sarah is our team captain and our leading scorer. If supporting excellence is wrong, then I guess we're all wrong. Team captain, Mrs. Martinez sputtered. Since when? Jessica's smile got wider. Since Coach Martinez announced it yesterday, didn't he tell you? He had indeed announced it the day before, in what I suspected was his own response to his wife's behavior.
Making me team captain sent a clear message about where he stood, and it gave me official status that made it harder for anyone to question my place on the team.
Mrs. Martinez's face went through several color changes before she managed to speak again. "We'll see how long that lasts," she said, and walked away. That night, Jessica called me, laughing so hard she could barely speak. "Did you see her face?" I thought she was going to spontaneously combust right there in the hallway. But I wasn't laughing. Mrs. Martinez's reaction told me that we had escalated things and she was going to escalate back. The question was how far she was willing to go. I got my answer the following Monday when I was called to the principal's office. Principal Johnson was a fair man who had always been supportive of the athletics program, but he looked uncomfortable when I sat down across from his desk. "Sarah, I've received some concerns about your behavior and attitude on the basketball team," he said carefully. My heart sank. "What kind of concerns?" "There have been suggestions that you're creating division within the team, that you're playing the victim and making other players feel like they have to choose sides." I stared at him, barely able to process what I was hearing. Mrs. Martinez had somehow managed to flip the script, to make my teammates' support look like evidence of my problematic behavior. "Mr. Johnson, have you talked to any of my teammates about this?" "Not yet. I wanted to hear your side first." "My side is that Mrs. Martinez has been harassing me for weeks, making racist comments about my place on the team, and my teammates have been supporting me. If that looks like division, it's because she created it." Principal Johnson leaned back in his chair looking troubled. "Sarah, those are serious accusations. Do you have any evidence of this harassment?" I thought about the notebook Maria had been keeping, about all the documented incidents, about the witnesses to every conversation. "Yes, I do. I'm going to need to see that evidence. And I'm going to need to talk to other people involved. This is a very serious matter." I left his office feeling nauseous but also oddly relieved. Finally, someone in authority was taking this seriously. Finally, there was going to be an official investigation instead of just my word against hers. But I also knew that Mrs. Martinez had just raised the stakes considerably. She was no longer content to just make my life miserable. She was trying to get me kicked off the team entirely. That afternoon, I gathered my teammates and told them about the meeting with Principal Johnson. The room went dead quiet. "She's trying to get you kicked off the team," Maria said, stating the obvious. "Maybe," I said, "but Mr. Johnson wants to talk to witnesses. He wants to see our documentation. We're finally going to have a chance to tell our side of the story officially." Over the next week, Principal Johnson conducted his investigation. He interviewed every member of the team individually. He talked to Coach Martinez. He reviewed our documentation, which by now included detailed accounts of more than a dozen incidents. He even talked to other students and parents who had witnessed some of Mrs. Martinez's behavior at school events. The picture that emerged was clear and damning. Mrs. Martinez had engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment against me, using racist language and creating a hostile environment. Multiple witnesses corroborated the same basic facts, and there was no evidence whatsoever that I had been divisive or problematic. When Principal Johnson called me back to his office the following Friday, I could tell from his expression that the investigation had not gone the way Mrs. Martinez had hoped. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," he said. "After reviewing all the evidence and talking to everyone involved, it's clear that you have been the victim of inappropriate and unacceptable behavior. Mrs. Martinez will no longer be permitted at school events or basketball activities." The relief was overwhelming, but it was mixed with anger that it had taken an official investigation for anyone to take my situation seriously. "What about the accusations against me?" I asked, completely unfounded. "Your teammates and coaches speak very highly of your character and leadership. In fact, Coach Martinez submitted a formal letter supporting you and condemning his wife's actions." That last part surprised me. Coach Martinez had put his marriage on the line to support me, and I felt a deep gratitude for his integrity. "Mrs. Martinez has been banned from all school property," Principal Johnson continued. "If she violates this ban or attempts to contact you in any way, we'll involve law enforcement." I walked out of that office feeling like I could breathe fully for the first time in weeks. The immediate threat was over.
Mrs. Martinez could no longer harass me directly, and everyone knew officially that her accusations against me were baseless. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. I had learned something important about myself, and about fighting back against injustice. I had learned that staying quiet and hoping problems would go away didn't work. I had learned that having people who support you makes all the difference. And I had learned that sometimes you have to be willing to escalate a conflict in order to resolve it. Most importantly, I had learned that I belonged exactly where I was, regardless of what anyone else thought about it. Mrs. Martinez had tried to make me doubt my worth and my place on the team, but all she had really done was force me to prove it to myself and everyone else. The season was just beginning, and I was ready to show everyone exactly what a girl like me could do on a basketball court. 3 months later, we were undefeated and heading into the state tournament. The ban on Mrs. Martinez had created an unexpected peace, but it also revealed something I hadn't anticipated. Without her constant negativity poisoning the atmosphere, our entire team had transformed. We played with a confidence and joy that had been missing before, and it showed in our record. I was averaging 22 points and 9 assists per game, and the college recruitment letters were piling up on my kitchen table. Duke, Stanford, UConn, Iowa State. Schools I had only dreamed about were now actively pursuing me. My parents could hardly believe it when coaches started calling the house directly, speaking in careful, respectful English to my mother, and asking when they could schedule home visits. But the real validation came from something unexpected. During our regional championship game against Central Valley, the opposing coach approached me after we won by 18 points. "Sarah," he said, shaking my hand longer than was typical for a post-game courtesy. "I've been coaching high school basketball for 27 years, and I've never seen a point guard with your vision and basketball IQ. Whatever college gets you is going to be very lucky." Coach Martinez overheard this and smiled broadly. Later, as we were loading the bus, he pulled me aside. "You know what the best part of this season has been?" he asked. "The wins, I guessed. Watching you become who you really are," he said. "Last year you were a good player trying to make everyone else comfortable with your presence. This year you're a great player who knows she belongs here." He was right. Something fundamental had shifted in how I carried myself. I no longer apologized for taking up space or being good at basketball. I no longer second-guessed my instincts or played smaller to make other people comfortable. I had learned that some people would question my right to be there regardless of what I did, so I might as well be excellent and let my performance speak for itself. The state tournament was being held 3 hours away in Des Moines, and the entire town seemed to be planning to make the trip. This was the furthest our girls' basketball team had advanced in over a decade, and the excitement was infectious. Local businesses put up signs wishing us luck, and the school organized a send-off pep rally that filled the entire gymnasium. As I sat in the bleachers during the pep rally, watching the cheerleaders and listening to the band play our fight song, I thought about how different this felt from the beginning of the season. Back then, I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if I deserved to be there, worried about what people were saying about me. Now I was team captain of an undefeated squad, heading to state, with college coaches fighting over who would get to offer me a scholarship. But the real measure of how much things had changed came the day before we left for the tournament. I was at my locker when Ashley Peterson approached me. Ashley was one of those girls who existed at the center of every social circle, popular in a way that seemed effortless and natural. We had never really talked before, moving in completely different worlds, despite attending the same small school. "Hey Sarah," she said, seeming nervous. "I wanted to tell you something before you leave for state." I waited, curious about what Ashley Peterson could possibly want to say to me. My little sister Emma is in 8th grade, and she's been playing basketball since she was 6. She's really good, but she's also the only Latina girl on her team, and some parents have been saying things. Making comments about whether she really belongs, whether she's taking opportunities from other girls. I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach, recognizing the story, when she heard about what happened with you and Mrs. Martinez and how you stood up for yourself. It gave her courage to keep playing instead of quitting like she was thinking about doing. Ashley paused, looking down at her hands. "I just wanted you to know that what you did mattered."
Not just for you, but for other girls who are watching and learning that they don't have to accept being treated badly just because they're different. I was so surprised by this conversation that I didn't know what to say at first. I had been so focused on my own situation that I hadn't thought about how it might affect other people. Is Emma okay now? I asked. She's better. The coach had a meeting with parents after Emma's mom complained, and things have improved. But she still wears your jersey number on her practice shirts, because she says you showed her that girls like you too can be excellent at sports, and people just have to deal with it. That afternoon I went home and told my parents about the conversation with Ashley. My mother was quiet for a long time after I finished the story. In Taiwan, she finally said in careful English, "We have saying, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. I teach you to keep head down, work hard, don't make trouble. But maybe in America, sometimes you have to stick up to protect other people who come after you." My father nodded thoughtfully. "You become strong so Emma can be strong too. This is good thing." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma Peterson, about all the other girls who might be facing similar situations, about the responsibility that came with being visible and successful. Mrs. Martinez had been wrong about almost everything, but she had been right about one thing. I was representing something bigger than myself. Not because I was a diversity quota or a political statement, but because excellence combined with difference sends a powerful message to people who need to see it. The next morning, we loaded onto the bus for Des Moines. As we pulled out of the school parking lot, I saw a banner hanging from the overpass that read "Sarah Chen and the Roosevelt Eagles make history at state." Someone had spray-painted Chen in red letters twice as big as everything else. Jessica, sitting next to me on the bus, followed my gaze and grinned. "Looks like the whole town has your back now." She was right. The transformation had been gradual but complete. The same community that had harbored Mrs. Martinez's attitudes had embraced me as their hometown hero heading to the state championship. It was a reminder that people could change, that minds could be opened, that success had a way of shifting narratives. Our first game at state was against a team from Cedar Rapids that had a reputation for aggressive defense and trash talk. I was prepared for physical play, but I wasn't prepared for what their point guard said to me during the opening tip-off. "Hope you're ready to get exposed," she whispered. "Everybody knows you only made it this far because of politics." For a split second, I felt that old familiar doubt creeping in. Then I looked at my teammates, saw the confidence and trust in their eyes, and remembered everything I had learned about my own worth. "Let's see," I said back to her and proceeded to score 8 points in the first 4 minutes of the game. We won by 26 points. I finished with 31 points, 12 assists, and 5 steals. After the game, the Cedar Rapids coach sought me out in the hallway. "That was a clinic you put on out there," he said. "I've been coaching for 15 years, and I've never seen a high school point guard control a game like that." The validation felt good, but it wasn't the most important thing anymore. What mattered was that we were advancing to the semifinals, that my teammates were playing with confidence and joy, that somewhere in Iowa City, Emma Peterson was probably watching highlights and believing a little more in her own potential. The semifinal game was the hardest we had played all season. We were down by 8 points at halftime against a team from Davenport that had 3 players already committed to Division I schools. In the locker room, Coach Martinez was calm but serious. "This is what we've worked for all season," he said. "Not just to be here, but to compete with the best teams in the state. Sarah, I need you to take over this game. Be aggressive, make plays, and trust your teammates to follow your lead." I looked around at my teammates, these girls who had supported me through the worst parts of the season, who had stood up to harassment and documented every incident, who had celebrated my successes like they were their own. "We've been through harder things than this," I said. "If we can handle Mrs. Martinez, we can handle anyone." The entire team laughed, and I could feel the tension breaking. The second half was magical. We outscored Davenport by 14 points, and I played the best basketball of my life. Everything felt effortless and connected. When we took the lead with 3 minutes left in the game, the crowd noise was so loud I couldn't hear myself think. When the final buzzer sounded, confirming our victory, my teammates mobbed me at center court. We were going to the state championship.
That night, in the hotel, I called my parents. They were both crying with happiness, and for the first time, I realized how much stress they had carried during the worst parts of my conflict with Mrs.
Martinez. They had worried that their daughter might lose something she loved because of prejudice they recognized all too well from their own experiences. "We are so proud," my mother said through tears. "Not just basketball, proud of how you fight for yourself and for other girls." The championship game was against West High from Iowa City, the defending state champions. They had been undefeated for 2 seasons, had 4 players committed to major colleges, and were heavily favored to repeat. The local newspapers were calling it David versus Goliath, with us clearly cast as David. I liked those odds. The morning of the championship game, I woke up feeling completely calm. Not the artificial calm of someone trying to convince themselves they weren't nervous, but the genuine peace that comes from knowing you've prepared for this moment your entire life. During our team breakfast, Coach Martinez made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I've been coaching for 20 years," he said, "and I've never been prouder of a team than I am of you girls. Not because of your record or because you made it to state, but because of how you've supported each other through adversity. You've shown that basketball is a team sport in every sense of the word, on and off the court." He looked directly at me when he said the next part. "Sarah, you've grown into the kind of leader every coach dreams of having. Someone who elevates everyone around them and never backs down from a challenge. Whatever happens today, you've already won the most important victory." The game itself was everything a championship should be. Back and forth, lead changes, incredible plays on both sides. With 2 minutes left, we were tied at 68 points, and I could feel the weight of the moment on everyone's shoulders. That's when I remembered something Mrs. Martinez had said months earlier, about how some girls were natural fits for leadership roles. She had meant it as an insult, suggesting that I wasn't one of those girls. But looking around at my teammates, seeing their trust and confidence, I realized she had accidentally given me the perfect description of who I had become. I was a natural fit for leadership. Not because of my background or my appearance, but because I had learned how to lift others up while standing strong myself. Because I had learned that true leadership means fighting for your team even when the fight gets personal and painful. With 30 seconds left and the score tied, I stole the ball at half court and had a clear path to the basket. But instead of taking the easy layup, I saw Maria open in the corner and made the pass. She hit the three-pointer that won us the state championship. As confetti fell from the ceiling and we celebrated at center court, I thought about Mrs. Martinez watching this on television somewhere, seeing the girl she had tried to convince everyone didn't belong holding up a state championship trophy. I thought about Emma Peterson cheering from her living room. I thought about all the girls who would come after us, who would see that excellence comes in all forms and that the right response to discrimination is not to shrink, but to shine brighter. 6 months later, I signed with Stanford University on a full scholarship. At the signing ceremony, Principal Johnson spoke about how proud the school was of my achievements, both athletic and academic. Coach Martinez talked about leadership and perseverance. My parents cried again, and this time so did I. But the moment that meant the most came after the official ceremony, when a group of younger girls approached me for autographs. One of them was Emma Peterson, now a high school freshman and already making waves on the JV team. "Thank you," she said simply as I signed her basketball, "for showing us that we belong here too." I looked at these girls, these future athletes and leaders, and I realized that Mrs. Martinez had been wrong about everything except the stakes. This had been about more than just me, or even our team. It had been about proving that girls like us don't just belong in sports, we excel in sports, we lead in sports, and we make everyone around us better. "You don't just belong here," I told Emma and the other girls. "You're going to change everything." And as I watched them walk away, talking excitedly about their own basketball dreams, I knew they would. 2 years into my Stanford career, I got a phone call that changed everything I thought I knew about closure. I was in my dorm room studying for a psychology midterm when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Sarah, this is Patricia Martinez." The voice hit me like ice water. Mrs. Martinez. After all this time, after everything that had happened, she was calling me directly. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she continued before I could respond. "But I need to tell you something, and I couldn't live with myself if I didn't." My first instinct was to hang up. My second was to record the call in case she was about to threaten me again. But something in her voice stopped me. She sounded different, smaller, broken in a way that made me curious despite myself. "I'm listening," I said carefully. "I was wrong, about everything, about you, about what you deserved, about why you were successful. I was completely utterly wrong, and I've spent the last 2 years watching your success and hating myself for what I tried to do to you." The silence stretched between us while I tried to process what I was hearing. "I don't expect forgiveness," she continued. "I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I see now what everyone else saw then. You weren't taking anything from anyone. You were earning everything you got, and you were making everyone around you better in the process." "Why are you calling me now?" I asked. "Because I've been getting help. Therapy, and my therapist says that making amends is part of recovery, but more than that, I've been volunteering at a youth center in Des Moines, working with kids from immigrant families, and there's this girl there who reminds me so much of you at that age." She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. "Her name is Fatima. She's 15, plays basketball, incredibly talented, and her family moved here from Somalia 3 years ago. And last week, at a tournament, I heard some parents saying the exact same things about her that I used to say about you. The exact same cruel, ignorant things." My chest tightened as I imagined another girl going through what I had experienced. And I realized that I helped create the environment where that kind of thinking was acceptable. I realized that my words and my attitude had consequences beyond just hurting you. They made other people think it was okay to question whether kids like you and Fatima belonged in sports. "What did you do?" I asked. "I stood up and told those parents they were wrong. I told them about you, about how talented you were, about how I had let my own prejudices blind me to your excellence. I told them that girls like Fatima don't take opportunities away from other kids, they create more opportunities for everyone by raising the level of play." I found myself sitting down hard on my dorm room bed, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn this conversation had taken. Did it help? I don't know yet, but Fatima's coach asked me to speak to the whole team about bias and how it affects young athletes. And I've been going to other schools, talking to coaches and parents about recognizing and confronting their own prejudices. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had tried to drive me out of basketball was now traveling around Iowa educating people about exactly the kind of discrimination she had practiced. "Sarah, I know this doesn't undo the harm I caused you. I know you succeeded despite what I did, not because of anything I learned later. But I wanted you to know that your success, your refusal to back down, it changed my mind. It forced me to confront some very ugly truths about myself. I appreciate you calling," I said, and I realized I meant it. "It takes courage to admit you were wrong about something that fundamental. It takes more courage to stand up to people like I used to be," she replied. "You were just a kid, and you handled that situation with more grace and strength than I've shown in most of my adult life." After I hung up, I sat in my room for a long time, trying to process the conversation. Part of me felt vindicated, hearing her acknowledge that everything I had believed about her motivations was correct. But a bigger part of me felt something unexpected. Hope. If someone as entrenched in her prejudices as Mrs. Martinez could change, could learn, could become an advocate instead of an opponent, then maybe change was possible for anyone. I called my mother that night and told her about the conversation. She listened without interrupting, which was her way when something was important. "What do you think?" I asked when I finished. "I think," she said slowly, "that sometimes the people who hurt us the most can become the people who help others the most, because they understand the damage that kind of thinking can do." "Do you think I should forgive her?" "I think forgiveness is not something you do for other people. You do it for yourself, when you're ready if you're ready, but I also think that woman calling you shows that your fighting back changed more than just your own life." The next semester, I started a mentorship program at Stanford for young female athletes from immigrant families. We paired college players with high school girls who were navigating the challenges of being different in sports environments that weren't always welcoming. The program grew quickly, expanding to include girls from all backgrounds who felt like outsiders in their athletic communities. One of our first mentees was a girl named Aisha Hassan, a soccer player whose parents had immigrated from Bangladesh.
She was dealing with coaches who mispronounced her name, teammates who made comments about her hijab, and college scouts who seemed to question whether she was committed enough to succeed at the next level. Working with Aisha reminded me of my own journey, but it also showed me how much progress had been made. She had resources and support systems that hadn't existed when I was in high school. She had examples of successful athletes who looked like her and came from similar backgrounds. Most importantly, she had a community of people who believed that her differences were strengths, not obstacles to overcome. The thing is, Aisha told me during one of our sessions, "I know I'm good enough, I know I belong here. But sometimes it gets exhausting having to prove it over and over again to people who've already made up their minds about me." "The exhaustion is real," I told her, "and it's not fair that you have to carry that extra weight. But remember that every time you prove them wrong, you're making it a little easier for the girl who comes after you." 6 months later, Aisha signed with UCLA on a full scholarship. At her signing ceremony, she mentioned our mentorship program and talked about the importance of having role models who understand the unique challenges faced by athletes from immigrant families. But the moment that really brought everything full circle happened last month. I was back in Iowa for the holidays, visiting my parents, when I got a text from Coach Martinez asking if I would be willing to speak to his current team. They were having a great season, undefeated, and heading into the playoffs, but he thought they could benefit from hearing about leadership and overcoming adversity. When I walked into the Roosevelt High gym for the first time in 3 years, it felt surreal. Everything was exactly the same, but I was completely different. The girl who had been terrorized in this building by an adult who should have supported her was now a college athlete returning as an inspiration. The current team was diverse in ways that my team never was. There were Black girls, Latina girls, Asian girls, white girls, all playing together seamlessly. The roster reflected the changing demographics of Iowa, and more importantly, it reflected a basketball program that valued talent regardless of what package it came in. After I spoke to the team about persistence and self-advocacy, one of the players, a sophomore named Isabella Rodriguez, approached me. "My older sister told me about what happened with you and Mrs. Martinez," she said. "She said it was a big deal at the time, that it changed how people talked about players like us. Players like us, you know, girls who don't look like what people expect basketball players to look like. Girls whose families are from somewhere else. Girls who have to work twice as hard to get half as much respect." I looked at this confident, articulate 15-year-old and realized she was describing challenges I remembered well, but she was doing it without the fear and uncertainty that had defined my early high school experience. "Do you feel like you have to prove you belong here?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said honestly, "but mostly I feel like I'm here to play basketball and win games. If people have a problem with that, it's their problem, not mine." That confidence, that sense of ownership over her place on the team, was everything I had hoped my fight with Mrs. Martinez might create for future players. Isabella and her teammates didn't question their right to be there the way I had. They understood that excellence was the only credential they needed. As I was leaving the gym that night, I ran into Principal Johnson in the parking lot. He was still serving as principal, though he looked a bit grayer and more tired than I remembered. "Sarah," he said, smiling broadly, "I heard you were speaking to the team tonight. How are things at Stanford?" "Really good," I said. "Thank you for how you handled everything when I was here. I know that situation couldn't have been easy to navigate." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, that whole experience taught me a lot about the difference between keeping the peace and doing what's right. For too long, I think I prioritized not making waves over protecting students who needed my support. You did the right thing in the end. Eventually, but you shouldn't have had to go through all of that before I took action. You were just a kid trying to play basketball." I thought about Mrs. Martinez's phone call, about the therapy and volunteer work and speaking engagements she was doing now. I thought about Aisha and Isabella and all the girls who would come after them. "Maybe everything happened the way it needed to happen," I said. "Maybe if it had been easier, if someone had stepped in sooner, we wouldn't have learned everything we needed to learn about standing up for ourselves and each other." Walking to my car that night, I felt a deep sense of completion. Not because Mrs. Martinez had apologized or because the school had changed its policies, but because I could see the ripple effects of that difficult time spreading outward in positive ways. Girls who had never heard my name were benefiting from the precedent that had been set, from the conversations that had been started, from the awareness that had been raised. Martinez had been wrong about almost everything, but she had been accidentally right about one thing: what I represented was bigger than basketball. Not because I was a token or a symbol, but because excellence combined with difference has the power to expand possibilities for everyone. The girl who had once been told she didn't belong in sports was now helping to create a world where belonging was assumed, where talent was recognized regardless of its packaging, where the question wasn't whether girls like us deserved to be there, but what we were going to accomplish now that we were. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Not the championships or the scholarships or the apologies, but the knowledge that the ground I had fought to stand on was now solid enough for others to build on. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.